Support the Amigos podcast and keep the Amiga goodness flowing for just $1 a month. Visit our page at patreon.com/AmigosPodcast.
Amiga, the first personal computer that gives you a creative edge.
Amigos, the podcast about everything Amiga. Amigos is a proud member of the Throwback Network, your home for quality retro podcasts. And now, here are your hosts, Aaron Dowdy and John Bodovkar Schaller.
Hello, Amigos. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today we're going to talk about Wing Commander.
Oh!
And Aaron, this week, there's not a whole lot of news in the Amiga world. And so instead, I thought that we just jump right in. Just talk about it.
Jump right into Wing Commander.
Just talk about Wing Commander, because let me tell you something, Aaron. As somebody that's researched this game constantly,
yes,
you may not know, but there's a lot of backstory in this game. There's a lot of sequels. There's a lot to talk about.
So you've dug in deep, haven't you?
Now what I've done is I've given all this knowledge to you, of course, because I don't want to make you look dumb.
Oh, really?
I typed it up for you here in your notes.
You have?
Yeah, and you can fill in our listeners on what's important to know about this storied franchise.
In all honesty, Wing Commander is one of the more epic games that we've had a look at here. So we're going to dig in and see what we can find out. So Wing Commander was released on the Amiga in '92. There was a version that was released a year later on the CD32, right, which we'll talk about a little bit in a little while. So, Wing Commander is really one of the most pivotal pieces of gaming software ever to come down the pike. It was put out by Origin. We haven't covered much Origin stuff. Have we covered anything from Origin? I'm trying to think if we ever have covered anything. And they were a huge name back in the day. I don't think we've covered anything.
I don't think so.
They were on the Amiga. They were responsible for Mobius, Ogre, Omega, Space Rogue, Space Rogue was a game I thought was pretty cool when it was sort of the precursor to Wing Commander. Times of Lore, and of course they did the Ultima stuff.
That's right. That's where I know them from.
Yeah, and they did Ultima 3 through 6 and a game called Windwalker. So, and I think they published this and produced it. This was their team that did it. This came on amazingly. This surprised me right out of the gate. This came on 3 floppy disks. I would have bet it came on 100 floppy disks at the time. Because most of the, I had Wing Commander for the PC, and it just seems like it was a larger game than 3 discs. I was surprised when I went out to play this.
Now,
only 3
let me
discs.
ask you: on the PC at this time, were discs higher capacity than they were on the Amiga?
Yeah.
Had we gotten to the 1.3 megabyte deal?
Well, on the Amiga. Your discs were 880s.
Okay.
And on the PC, you were 1.44s.
1.44, okay.
3.5 inch discs. So they were higher capacity. Now, eventually, Amiga had a higher capacity drive, but no one had one.
Mm-hmm.
So this was hard drive installable if you had enough memory to do so, which would be you had to have an Amiga with 1.5 megs of memory to get it on the hard drive. So this game was basically this was Chris Roberts' baby. All right, he's the fellow who is currently, the last I heard, still unfunded. He was the fellow that was out there doing that Star Citizen.
Oh, it's funded.
Did it ever get made?
It's made. It's out.
How was it? Have you tried it?
Well, it depends on who you talk to, and it depends on what your expectations were.
Really? Let's get into it for a second. What do you know about it?
So it's one of these things that it sort of ran away, where they're like, and if you give us this much money, it will become this. And they didn't expect anybody to give them that much money. Mm-hmm. So it's still currently actively being developed, and it is one part space combat. I think that there's a first-person shooter component to it.
Really?
Yeah, and it's all of these different things. And the jury is still, it's a gorgeous game that you have to have very, very high specs to run well. But the space combat part of it is, people say it's much better than Elite. But
the current Elite,
yeah, the current Elite. But they say that, it's because you have to purchase things kind of with this real money, it's like the quality of your ship depends on how much you've donated to the project.
With real money?
With real money.
Oh my God.
So that it's controversial to say the least.
That sounds horrible. So, and how long has it been out?
I believe we'll have to ask that maybe the chat can give us an exact number when this was released, but I know it's been out for at least a year and a half, 2 years.
I see. And you never had any inclination to play it, not your bag?
Well, I don't want to. To me, the whole like give us this money and we'll give you a better experience. This kind of turned me off.
Well, so it'll be. Well, I mean, I know this was a much heralded game from back in the day, but
it's fine.
So anyway, getting back to it. So this is what makes this game different from a lot of Amiga games or games in general. Right? There's one big thing. It had a huge team that worked on it. This was a multi-million-dollar affair. This was not 2 or 3 or even 5 guys. It was the Amiga port alone was probably 10, 12 guys just to port it, and who knows how many people worked on the original game. It was a team of people. Mm-hmm. And so what you had, I like to look at Wing Commander the same way I look at, say, Star Wars or Jaws, and that this was these were the movies that ushered in the popcorn movie summer blockbuster that sort of is still prevalent today. This was the same thing. This was the big, huge, big budget blockbuster, and what it did when it came out was it drove everyone else to sort of emulate what they were doing. It made the small teams that would make normal games seem sort of passe.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it really, like you said, it ushered in this era of larger and larger development teams.
Right. Absolutely.
Bigger and bigger budgets.
So, so when this game came out, it was it would run on a stock Amiga with 1 meg of chip RAM. Okay. That was the bare minimum you could have to run it. I can tell you, and I will be releasing a video of this. I played this on a stock Amiga, and this is, I'm just going to jump and say that on a stock Amiga, this game is virtually unplayable. They recommend, even on the box, it says it will run on this, but we recommend some sort of accelerator. If I had bought this in the day and tried to play it, I would have been appalled. I mean, it is so unbelievably slow. And just to load it up, to get through the opening, and to get to the point where you're in space took me just like 20 minutes of just sitting there waiting for everything to, even the cutscenes and stuff were incredibly slow.
So, like, for example, when they're showing the ships taking off in that scene that looks just out of Star Wars when all the X-Wings are taking off,
right?
That it's sort of chugging along through that.
Let me put it in perspective. I'm sure you've watched the opening of this, and I'll get to why this stuff's important in a minute, but just to give you an idea of how slow it ran, there's a scene where when you're scrambling to get into your fighter, and it shows these guys running down a hall. I mean, it looks like they're running like this, super slow motion, but that's the way everything is. It's just everything runs about, I would say, half to a quarter of what it would normally run.
Right.
And so it was a miracle that they could even put this on an Amiga. I mean, really, I remember when it came out, and I was kind of surprised because at that point the PC had jumped ahead in a lot of ways. We'll get into that in a little while. So, what is Wing Commander? Well, at its core, it's a 3D space shooter. You take the role of a new pilot that comes aboard the Tiger's Claw, which is a Confederate ship, and you come into the ship and when the Confederacy's amidst a war with these guys called the Kilrathi, which are these large kind of lion-headed creatures. They're cat people, and the two sides are battling, and the game basically takes place as the battle is unfolding, right? And so the storyline is that you're an up-and-coming fighter pilot that is making his way to higher rank and more importance. The game accomplishes this in very clever ways. When you start the game, I thought this is pretty neat. You start the game and you're looking at like a space scene in front of you, and it says, and you see a guy sitting basically in like a cockpit, and it says "Game Over," and it turns out you're sitting in an environmental arcade machine.
I love that. I thought that was so cool.
Right, and you instantly die. Right, and it says, "Please enter your name and call sign." Well, that was a great way to do that. I thought that was very clever, you know. And then you get out of this thing and you realize you're in a bar on a ship, and there are people there you can talk to. There's a bartender, Shot Glass, I think's his name, and then there's a couple people there at the bar, and you can talk to them right away. So right away you know you're in for something a little bit different, because it doesn't throw you right into the action. Everyone there's friendly, and it looks good. It almost looks like a scum game at this point. When you're in this bar, and you can walk in a couple areas of the ship. The next place you walk off the bar is your barracks. The barracks is very clever. It's basically a cleverly hidden option screen, and you can save your game in there. And all the beds are empty. When you save your game, a bed is populated by your saved game. A guy, in your bed.
I love games that do that. I don't know what made me think of it, but Skate or Die is another game that does where you're in the skate shop and that's the option screen. Where you sign up for the tournaments and stuff like that. So I love games that don't just give you a blank. This is the option screen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they don't take you out of
right.
Of
they
the
don't
game.
take you out of the experience.
And the fact that your save games appear as guys in the barracks, I think that's great. And the barracks on the ship is working for the government as I do. What it reminded me of is our offices. You got a bucket there to catch stray water, come down the ceiling. It's just sort of a dump,
Do you have girly posters up on the walls?
We don't, not yet. So out of here you can go to the flight deck, and that's where you actually start the game proper. And everything in the game is very cinematically done. So, for example, your opening scene, you walk in and the flight commander is giving assignments for the patrols that day. And he talks about it, he talks about you, and talks about what you're going to do. And then he has an animated move where he points over here, and there's a star chart. It shows you what your nav points are, and it gives you instructions on the flight. I mean, these are pretty in detail instructions. So okay, and what something else I like about the game, it tells you here's what you're going to do. It lays out the instructions for you right away, and then what your task is. And then often NPCs will ask questions that sort of fill in any gaps you might have. Am I allowed to shoot? Can I leave the convoy? Stuff like that. And then from this screen, you go to there's like an alarm going off and there's people scrambling in the deck.
It's just like Star Wars when they do the assault on the Death Star.
What it reminds me of is Battlestar Galactica. Don't you ever watch that show?
Well, I never watched the original.
The original show was this has a lot in common with it. The way your guy launches is very similar to Battlestar Galactica, where they launch the ship on these little chutes or whatever, and they shoot out into space. And then once you get past all, and there's a guy that gets you in your cockpit, and they lower the thing, and it's all cinematically done.
Yeah, it's very nice.
And again, this is stuff that you didn't see that often.
Yeah.
And like we said, it was what it reminded me of was a CinemaWare game. In fact, this game reminded me a lot of Wings,
right?
In a lot of ways, but updated.
Yeah.
And so once you get past this part, then you're in space itself to do whatever mission you've been tasked with, and you're with any number of other ships. It could be a wing of ships, you could be in any position in that formation, and you fulfill your task, whether it's to go from point A to point B. There's escort missions, there's destroy missions, there's all kinds of different missions. The missions are what you would expect in a space game, just various missions to go blow this up, blow that up. The space combat itself. It's funny, when I played this game the first time on the PC, my least favorite part of the game was actually the space combat. I'm not saying it's bad, but even on my PC, it didn't run great, and this was something they would really pull together in future, but it was pretty good, and it was breaking new ground. The main thing that I had a problem with, if you look at the screen, you've got a cockpit view, and you're looking from the pilot's eyes. You can even see your legs. You've got your hand on the stick to control the plane or the ship, and when you move your joystick, he actually moves, which is cool.
Again, this is something that was not frequently seen.
He moves his hand in line with the way you're moving, so it gives you a kind of an interesting feeling that
okay.
Hey, I'm doing this.
Let's stop right here for a second, because I don't know if I just didn't see the option, but I was not able to find anywhere to change the controls to joystick controls. I had to use the keyboard.
That's strange. I used joystick.
Were your joystick controls just set up by default?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were. I used joystick straight away.
Yeah, no, I don't know if it might have been an emulation issue, but I just wanted to make sure that there was joystick support in this game.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I used the joystick. Actually, I used the CD32 gamepad when I played it. But so once you're in the cockpit mode, you've got screens to your left and right, which give you one of them's like a heads up, weapons display, and then the screen on the right is a sort of a text readout of what's going on, and also you can use it to order around your buddies. You can tell them to help you or to go back to base or to reform the formation.
Yeah, just
stuff
issue
like that.
different commands.
Right, and then right in front of you is a sort of a radar screen, the old patented round radar, and you've got screens, little screens to detect your speed and stuff. All well and good, and then a big eject thing at the top. And different ships are going to look a little different. But my biggest problem with the game is it's the limited view. I don't like having that much of the screen taken up by stuff. And it was my problem on every version of this. I thought the screen was too small. I would like to have had more, which is one thing they did not do in X-Wing and TIE Fighter. There was not nearly as much of the screen taken up with instrumentation. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if that was it could be a thing where they did that because of, for performance issues and whatnot.
I'm sure that had something to do with it, but also if you play like a real flight simulator, this is about as much screen as you get in flying a real plane. Well, you don't get a 360-degree field of view around you.
Admittedly, you're right, but this is just personal preference.
It's a video game. It should be more. It should
I thought like Wings, I could see a lot more.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And again,
well, you're also, when you're flying a biplane, of course you're going to see more because there's literally nothing around you.
Yeah, there's far less instrumentation in there, that's for sure. So, what made this game really unique, again, going back to the semantic stuff, is the way the missions unfolded. Because when you went on these missions, let's say the first mission you go on, your co-pilot, or your not co-pilot, but your wingman or woman gets killed. Okay.
Oh.
That means they are no longer in the game, and people mourn them. Mm-hmm. The story changes. Let's say you fail a mission. That could radically change what's happening in the war. There are branching paths, and
again, very much like Wings in that way.
Yeah, very much. Well, Wings did it, but really, when a guy died, it didn't affect the game at all. Mm-hmm. He just died in storyline, effectively. Right. In this game, if you lose one of your cohorts, like there'll be scenes in the bar where normally there'd be two people sitting in the seats. Well, one of them's not there. That means all their dialogue's gone. Any hints they'd give you, anything they had to add, they're all gone. And so that's unusual for a game, especially of that era. Again, it reminds me sort of like if we talk about Alone in It Came from the Desert. This is sort of like what they tried to do in that, to make it cinematic and have things, but they screwed it up a lot in that, if you'll recall.
Right.
They did a much better job.
Well, I think, again, this has to do with this development team was probably larger, so they were able to flesh out the actual gameplay a lot more than what they did in
absolutely. So this game on the Amiga, let's talk about visuals. Aside from the fact that the frame rate is, on a stock Amiga, is unbelievably low. To get this to work on the Amiga, they had to cut the colors down from, say, 256, I think, down to like 16. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it looks washed out and just not as good. The details aren't as crisp.
Right.
All right. Having played this on a PC, it just looked better. And the minimum specs on a PC, if you think about the fact that the Amiga is running at like 7.14 megahertz, and I think the minimum requirements on this on a PC were like a 386 or a high-end 286.
It's a big.
And you're
gap,
talking a huge gap in performance and memory too in certain instances. So they had to make a lot of concessions to get this thing to run. But if you can get past the color issue, you'll be okay to play this, provided you've got some sort of acceleration. Now, the CD32 version of this,
which I've got queued up here. So
I had a look at it. By the way, just while we're looking at it here, the very beginning of this, there's a guy that's conducting an orchestra. And I remember this opening for how awesome and how it struck me as how great it was.
It was very, very impressive.
You know, and Origin, they did a good job of making this game look special. Like, I'd never seen a game open like that, you know, and it had the fireworks and stuff.
Very cinematic. I know that's a word that gets thrown around a lot.
Right. I mean, again, this is very much like a Cinemaware game. They did the little details, the background details that made it fun. So the Amiga CD32 version of this looks pretty darn good. It runs a lot faster. The flight stuff is a lot better.
Yeah.
I mean, just everything in general looks better. It's snappier, and it doesn't take forever to do things. It's probably the format it should have stayed on, and never should have came to the 8 bits. Now, the good thing is, if you had an 8-bit with some acceleration, I mean, not 8-bit, but Amiga 500, Amiga 600. If you had an Amiga with some acceleration, you could do pretty good. Again, I played this on the 600. It was horrible. Then I emulated it and kind of ramped up what it took. And the Amiga 1200 ran it. It was perfectly playable in the 12, and anything above that was fine. So strictly everything below that should just give it a pass. I mean, it's not even worth looking at.
Right.
This game had not just the branching paths. It had not just the interesting characters, but it also had really kind of interesting music. The music was situational. It would change given what was happening on the screen or what was being talked about, and they did a good job of that. I thought that was neat. And a lot of people love the music in this. I was going to get your opinion on this since you're a music guy. To me, this sounded an awful lot like ad-libby type music, and I'm wondering if they didn't just port this directly over with like the ad-lib stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to know more about how, you know, soundtracks or how music is ported from system to system, because, you know, the Amiga is famous for having really powerful, you know, music coprocessors and things, or audio coprocessors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, how what the analogous thing was on PC. I mean, I'm sure it was something like ad-lib.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, that's just, I hear a lot of ad-lib from back in the day because my buddy had an ad-lib card. I have to say, I never had an ad-lib card. I went from Tandy sound directly to a sound blaster, so I skipped that. I never liked the way ad-lib sounded. It's got that kind of hollow synthy sound.
To me, it sounds an awful lot like Amiga sound.
Well, I mean, maybe it's just me, but it's just the arrangements and stuff. It sounded very ad-libby. So that, again, it could just be me. The musician that did this was a fellow named Mark Allen Knight. He actually did some stuff on the Amiga, including Alfred Chicken, which we looked at. He did Battletoads, Guy Spy, which it's on my short list. He did Liberation and Overkill, and he did Sim City 2000 and Sim Life. So
be sure and check out my video of Liberation.
How was the music in that?
You know, I was so frustrated by every aspect of that experience, I blocked it out of my mind.
I can understand that. So this game released on quite a few systems. And of course, some of my personal favorites are on the list here. Again, there was the Super Nintendo release, which I admittedly I've never looked at, so I don't know how it runs or plays. Of course, the PC DOS version, the Sega CD version. They had a special version for the Tandy, which was presumably it would have been a 16-color version with the Tandy sound. Tandy sound was not bad. I mean, if for stuff that supported it. It also had a release in my personal favorite wacky system, the FM Towns Marty.
Oh, yeah.
Which we're still looking to get one of those.
That would be great.
Can you imagine just trying to get the software, the joysticks, where God only knows what you would have to. I don't know what one looks like if you brought one in. And again, they released versions of this that ran on a lot of different PC graphics chipsets. So you had the EGA and MCGA and VGA and all those crazy ones. So they probably ported. That's probably what they used for the Amiga graphics. They probably took the EGA or the MCGA version and ported that one.
Was the Tandy version of this game, the system that it ran on, was it pretty analogous to an Amiga of the time?
I had a Tandy TL. Okay, it had I would say a no with a but. It wasn't nearly as good as any Amiga, but what it did have was it had and I didn't have a hard drive, but you could put a hard drive in and out, which it would have that on some of the early Amigas. Of course, it had expansion slots, which it had that on early Amigas. It also had, ISA, style expansion slots. It also had Tandy sound, which was better than, I would say it was on par with Ad-Lib in some ways. Maybe I don't know how they would stack up, but it was just like sort of remedial, but better than beeping sound.
Right.
You could digitize sound on the Tandy I had with its built-in sound digitization program, but you couldn't do much with it. It's not like an Amiga where you could do something with it, and it was real scratchy. God only knows what you were. It wasn't
sampling.
Yeah, and it had its own built-in operating system called DeskMate, which was. Well, it's like a really low-end version of Windows that they were trying to get the hook on at the time. I would say, it was pretty close. I don't know. I can't recall what you could expand the memory to. I think it had like 640 meg or K or something. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I had one, but it wasn't a ton of stuff. I know the games weren't anywhere near as good as the Amiga games on it. So, but the fact that it got supported when this was out, I think this sort of game spelled the end of not just your small-time players, but it also sort of brought on the rush to upgrade your hardware.
Yeah.
Because
up until this point, there weren't a whole lot of games that taxed your hardware in the way that this could.
Yeah, and something else you got to consider, like I'm complaining about the way this ran on the 600. I'm not gonna lie, this ain't the first time I've played slow, crummy Wing Commander. Because I remember playing this on my old PC and it ran like garbage. Mm-hmm. And it's because it's funny on the Amiga, I'm not used to things running horribly.
Yeah.
Things all pretty much run the same. Mm-hmm. And there are a few titles that'll run a little bit slower. But loading this up, it took me back to my PC days where I would often load stuff up and it would just run like crap. I was like, well, it's unplayable,
Pishbot says that the 3DO also got a port.
It did. And the 3DO version, which the reason it wasn't listed because it was an enhanced version. And the 3DO version, I thought to myself, oh boy, I can't wait to see this. Well, I heard it was crap, unfortunately. So, but I'm still gonna have a look at it.
We'll have to take a look over at Amigo Studios East.
Yeah. So that one's definitely on the list. Again, like I mentioned, this thing required a 1.5 meg of memory to run the hard drive version. And of course, this is sort of an obvious statement, but the more memory you had, the better it worked, and if you had acceleration, it worked out great. Here's something I thought was kind of interesting, and I read this, and I thought it was odd, so I thought I'd throw it in here. So, the Amiga version of this, I saw this on Hall of Light. The Amiga version of Wing Commander was being ported over by a fellow named Nick Pelling. Okay, and as he was porting it over, he developed a near-fatal brain disease.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. And so it says here it was viral encephalitis.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of that. That's bad times.
It doesn't sound anything with that many letters and vowels in it, not good.
Yeah.
So so it happened right as he was porting this. Mm-hmm. And so Origin was in a weird spot trying to figure out what to do. So what they ended up doing is they said, listen, we're just going to wait until you recover and then you can finish. We're not going to give your code away. And from what the article said, most of the reason people think they didn't do that, probably some of it's just because they're being nice, but also they didn't think anyone else could get this to work because it was
such a
difficult translation. Yeah. And you can imagine how tough it would be to port this thing over. It would be really difficult, The 3DO version of this came out in '94. I think it was probably the latest version, and it was called Super Wing Commander. And eventually this even got ported to the Mac. I don't know, I was wondering if I thought maybe you had tried the Mac version of this.
No.
I could see this. Of course, much like Myst or anything else, if it's popular enough, it'll get ported to virtually everything. So there were tons and tons and tons of Wing Commander games, but this is the only one that came out on the Amiga. But I thought I'd touch on a couple of the other ones, and just for the significance they held to me personally. So you had the Secret Missions, which is an expansion, and then you had the Secret Missions 2.
Now this was like this is the original DLC, right?
Hey, back in the day they would just release expansion, and I'm sure you're not that young. You remember when they would just instead of just DLC in it,
right? But people complain about that sort of thing now, but it's been going on in this form forever.
I think there's a marked difference between the two.
Tell me why.
For example, the secret missions isn't on the same disc that you just bought and you just pay to unlock it. And number two, they didn't market this stuff with the intention. They didn't hold a ton of stuff back. I mean, these were legitimate expansions that were based on they thought, okay, maybe we'll do an expansion based on the popularity of the game. They weren't like built into the game outright like stuff is now. I mean, you got to admit, DLC is pretty much right there at Jump Street. I mean, instantly available no matter how well the game does.
Yeah, but that's just because it's as a direct result of something like the secret missions where they're like, hey, people buy this, so we should plan this from the get-go and maybe do a better job of it.
Yeah, I don't know. That's tough. I mean, would you say like Earl Weaver expansion discs were DLC?
Yeah, that's exactly what they are.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's paying money for additional content.
It is, but
that's what DLC is.
I don't think the game was structured the same way. I mean, games are structured around DLC and extra money now, microtransactions, where they weren't. I don't think they were like that before.
Well, arcade games are microtransactions.
Well, we're not talking about an arcade game here. We're talking about a home computer game.
Well, but also DLC is not a microtransaction.
Now, do you think? Let me ask you. Do you think Secret Missions 2 would have came out if Wing Commander had flopped?
No, but
Okay.
I mean, there's lots of DLC that never comes out when games flop.
Yeah,
when
but
modern games flop.
most modern games, the DLC is ready to go. Sometimes it's actually on the disc you purchase.
Sometimes it is.
Which is lame. Holding stuff out on the people that are buying the game, you should give them something for their money. I mean, I'll use the Star Wars stuff as a good example, which got EA in trouble recently. You can only penny pinch people so much before they revolt.
But all I'm saying is that this was the beginning of that stuff. You can blame Wing Commander for everything.
No, I don't
now.
agree with that, because there was expansion way before Wing Commander was out. So you're just trying to get me riled up, aren't you both? Don't listen to him, folks. He's in a mood. So anyway, like I said, there was Secret Missions 2, which was a further expansion. So then you had, of course, we mentioned Super Wing Commander, and then you had Wing Commanders that just kept on trucking, right? You had Wing Commander 2 that came out, then Wing Commander 3. Now, the one I remember, and I believe it was Wing Commander 4.
Which one was the one with Mark Hamill?
That's what I'm thinking of.
Okay.
So, in 80, I'm going just from my notes, and so in 94, when they knew, okay, Wing Commander's a big hit, they effectively changed its name to Wing Commander 1. And then they released it, and then in 96, you had Wing Commander come out as a package with the 2. So you'd have Wing Commander 1 and Wing Commander 2, and that's why they sort of changed the name to Wing Commander. So in the box, it would say Wing Commander 1, right? And so Wing Commander 3, Heart of the Tiger. Now that's the Wing Commander that I remember the most. And Wing Commander 3 and 4.
Now, was 4 the first one to be released on CD-ROM?
No, I don't think so. I think actually the combo, well, no, certainly not, because Wing Commander 1 was on CD-ROM for his Amiga CD32 and 3DO.
That's true, yeah.
So, obviously not that. So, Wing Commander 3 and Wing Commander 4, I believe, one of the two, I think it was Wing Commander 4 that featured the movie actors. It had John Rhys Davies. It had Mark Hamill.
Yeah, Ricky Drosher in the chat actually says Wing Commanders 3 through 5 featured Mark Hamill.
And also it had Ginger Lynn was in it as I believe that's who it was, the porn star, and she played the mechanic. You remember? Did you ever play any of these? Oh, have you ever seen footage of them?
I know that there's like Muppets in one of them.
No, the Muppets they're not really Muppets. They're I saw a background on how they made these. They're the Kilrathi, and they're more like animatronics, sort of.
What was that sci-fi show that had a bunch of Muppet stuff in it?
Sci-fi show?
Yeah, it was a TV show.
Oh, you're talking about... gosh, my buddy loved that show. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But it reminded me of that sort of thing.
Well, you gotta, given the time period, I know a lot of people sort of mock those guys, but I mean, I thought they looked pretty good for the time. Mm-hmm. The Kilrathi looked pretty, I mean, when I pictured in my head, I thought they recreated them pretty well. But I mean, if you think about the amount of talent you had in this, again, you had Mark Hamill, you had John Rhys Davies, and you also had the guy from, who's the fellow that was in Clockwork Orange? His name's killing me. You know what I'm talking about.
The main guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what his name is.
He was in it, and then, but I mean, it was...
Robert E. Mosley?
No. It looked awesome. And I remember thinking to myself, they've got it. They've got this movie thing going here. Because you had I mean, Mark Hamill was a top shelf actor in my mind, and it was perfect for people like me. That I mean, he may have been a B-lister at that point, but I mean, here he is. He's in this game.
Yeah, sure.
And John Rhys Davies, who had been in Star Wars, Farscape. That's the game we were talking. Thank you, Duncan. That's the movie, the show you were talking about. So when that happened, I thought it was awesome. It had cool special effects. I mean, that's when they started sinking a fortune into these games to make them happen. And they were cool. I mean, I thought the acting was good. I thought it was interesting. I thought this was the perfect game to enhance, to use that sort of video enhancement to make better. You know, I can't think of any other game where you could bring in actors to play the parts and it would work any better.
Right.
That's what, long story short. So they released, in 2006, they released a version of Wing Commander on the PlayStation. And which I thought was kind of
PlayStation 2.
The PlayStation
In 2006?
Oh, excuse me, PlayStation Portable.
Okay.
Which I think is kind of cool. And it was also, you can get the PC version of this on Good Old Games, GOG.com, which probably, and again, I'm Amiga through and through. But if you want a proper Wing Commander 1 and 2 experience, you can't play 2 on here. You're going to absolutely want to go with the PC. Even as good as the CD32 version is, I think the PC version is superior. This game won a ton of awards when it came out, as you can imagine. Of course, it came out on the PC in '91, so it predated Amiga by a year or two. So it won the 1991 Game of the Year. It got elected into the Hall of Fame. And this is all from Computer Gaming World. #7 best PC game of all time. It was on the Time Magazine 100 Best Video Games of All Time. It was PC Gamer number 23 Best Game of All Time. I mean, enough said. It was like
People
beloved.
love Wing Commander.
Right, absolutely.
And that's why when that guy, what's his name? Who's the lead?
Chris Roberts.
Chris Roberts. When he announced that he was doing the Star Citizen, people just lost their minds and started shoveling money into his hands.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I was excited. And I was not. I'm not gonna sit here and say I was the biggest Wing Commander fan, but I did enjoy it, and I recognize what it was. I mean, being a Cinemaware fan, this is my kind of game. And I thought they actually nailed the space battle. Like I said, I thought the weakest part was the actual gameplay, and I think they ironed it out as it went on. It's still not my favorite. I like Descent Free Space, for example, more as an actual game, a space combat game. But I thought this one was pretty good. Or X-Wing. I thought actually X-Wing and TIE Fighter both were really solid and fun, and I like the missions and stuff that says. But I mean, they were one-dimensional, and that's all they were. This had the extra layers that made it interesting, and you fell in love with you really liked the characters around you. So when they died, you felt bad. In that original one, it's a lot like a cannon fodder. When you've got a guy you've been building up for a while, and all of a sudden he gets killed, and he's at Boot Hill. You're like, man, I lost my, I feel like you lost your buddy.
Right.
It's sort of the same thing. So if you look at how this reviewed, and I was sort of interested to see how this was going to review. Again, given the fact that it's a big time game but it didn't run that well, and it was very all over the map. On Lemon, Wing Commander, and this is the straight up non CD32 version. They've got a Lemon score of 7.94, which. Okay.
I feel like that's a little bit high, to be honest with you.
Well, it sort of depends on how you're looking at it. It got good scores. I mean, for the most part, 80s and 90s and high 70s from most of the magazines early. And then, of course, as the years went on, Amigas were more able to play these. Some of the scores actually went up. And of course some didn't. Joker didn't score it. Sorry, Boat. There's nothing there for you. Of course, this game was pretty complex as a flight simulator, as a space vehicle simulator. I mean, you had your keyboard commands. You had a cheat sheet.
It wasn't that.
It was a lot more complex than. Like, let me stop right there and repeat.
This was
complex
here.
for Aaron, who's a dumb guy. So like Wings is my speed, where there's no keyboard controls at all.
I mean, this is nothing. I mean, even if you compare it to Elite, it's easy to jump into and get going.
Yeah. But I'm saying this is not just you don't just go out there and use your joystick to play. I mean, you're gonna have to use the keyboard, and smack away at it. So I looked this up on eBay, and this is well represented on eBay, which as one would expect given the fact that it sold 400 billion copies. But honestly, I don't know how many it sold on the Amiga, and I don't know if it was a big seller at the time, if it sold over time. It was bundled. There was a CD32 bundle with a game called Dangerous Streets, and that was something I saw a lot of too. So
yeah, that's when on the screenshot here, that was the only box I could find online of the CD32 Wing Commander was when it was bundled with this Dangerous Streets game.
So in all over Europe, and pretty much Italy, Germany, and the UK, you can get the boxed version. I saw it going from anywhere from $10 to $33 US before shipping. In the US, I did see a fellow selling just the discs. He was asking $14 for the 3 discs. That was it. The box in this is, it comes with a magazine. It's sort of an introduction guide to the ship. It's sort of like a ship magazine that they use to actually, it's like sort of like a tutorial magazine, which I thought was clever. It's got a big, thick manual.
This was really the golden era of stuff like that.
CD32 bundles with Dangerous Streets, around $36, $37. They were out there, and then even in the UK, I saw one go as cheaply as $12. So if you've got a CD32 and you want to play this, if you've got an Amiga and you want to play this on the Amiga, that's absolutely the way to go to get this, or play the CD32 version on your 1200, with WHD load. I did play this with the GoTech. I'm starting to do that just so I can. It's one thing we don't, and we've mentioned it before. We don't get the tactile feel of what it's like to play the game and swap out the discs. And so the GoTechs, I've been using it. And in terms of disc swappage, it's not the worst. Mm-hmm. There's only 3. I didn't think it was that bad, but I can see where it would get old after a while. So I've been rattling on for a while. Give me your thoughts. What did you think of the game overall? What did you like? What did you not like?
Overall, I thought it was good. Even I played it through emulation, but I played the original Amiga version, not the CD32 version. Mm-hmm. I thought that even with a really cranked up emulation setup, the space sequences were really, they ran at a very low frame rate. Especially compared to the CD32 version. Yeah. But I like games with a lot of atmosphere, and I like games that keep you in the experience and don't take you out of the experience. And I like when developers come up with creative ways to teach you concepts about the game or display different things about the game. And this game checks all the boxes.
It does. It does.
I really wish that I could have had all the documentation in my hands, like you were talking about the magazine, the ship magazine.
Oh,
that
yeah.
sounds great.
That would be nice. And I had to use a cheat sheet just to get all the keyboard controls. So it'd be nice to have a fold out or something that had that so I could sell on the keyboard.
Yeah, what I did is I just opened up the manual on PDF on my other monitor, and so I could
very
check
clever.
And see,
This is one of those games. It's funny, like I said, when this came out on the Amiga, I didn't look at it that much because at the time I didn't have anything but stock Amiga. And I don't remember ever playing this on the 1200, so I must have just played on when I had the second time I had it on 1000. This is a game that it pushed me to love it. And we didn't even mention the fact that when you die, or when one of your comrades, they have this really beautiful funeral service where everyone. All the troops line up on the flight deck outside the ship with their spacesuits on, and they send your coffin.
There's a 21 gun salute,
and they speak words about you, and they shoot they let your coffin drift into space, a la Spock in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Yeah. I'm always picture myself. I hope they're shooting me near the Genesis planet when they do that. But it's quite poignant, isn't it? Really, and the music, it's just really nice.
It is the best game over screen of all time.
It's got to be right up there.
It is the best.
And you don't want to see it because
that represents a lot of work going down the tubes.
Right, and you definitely. But when you see it, it does give you the feeling like, man, they could have just said game over.
Right. And it could have been like when you were playing the arcade machine at the beginning.
Right. This is one of those games I really wanted to love. But when I played the 600 version, and this is a game that is perfect. This is the reason why people emulate, or this is the reason why people get accelerators, is because of games like this, where you could sit down and play it. But this, part of me is sad about this game, and the part that's sad is the part that this was the point in gaming PC in Amiga gaming, where there was a shift in how games were going to be, because at this point, this is one of those games that revealed that the PC had not only caught up with the Amiga but had passed it, and you had to live with that. And so this is one of those games that your buddy might run on his PC and it looks great, and you fire it up and it looks like crap, and you're like, oh man. I mean, there's no way around. Even if you've got an accelerated Amiga, if you've got a Amiga 500 or a 2000 with an accelerator, you're still going to have those low color, crummier looking graphics to deal with. It just, that's when they passed us, and that's a heartbreaker.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that a Commodore couldn't get, do what the PC was doing, and continuously try to upgrade your equipment to allow for better stuff, because there's always going to be a tipping point if you stay still. And this game was one of the tipping points where they shoehorned this on the Amiga when they shouldn't have, and it made you realize, hey, our days are numbered. Something's gonna have to happen, and nothing happened, unfortunately, really, and that was it. So it's one of those tear in your eye sort of things. But overall, if you've got an accelerated Amiga or CD32, it's definitely worth checking out, even in its current state, just for the fun, if you don't feel like fooling around with the PC. So yeah, I enjoyed it I as best I could.
I understand. Well, let's. It's been a while since we checked in with some of our iTunes reviews.
Oh, you got some new ones?
Yeah, as
Okay,
always, we really appreciate it when you guys leave us iTunes reviews, because, like Apple or not, they are still the #1 driver in podcast adoption. So I'd like to read. This is a review written by Tito Boy 666.
It could be Tito Santana.
It could be. Is he still among the living?
Absolutely. He was in Madison just late last year.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. He says, my Amiga has the most memories per square inch of all computers and consoles I ever owned. I always love to get back in time and enjoy my Amiga. John and Aaron are keeping that sweet spot in me alive, one podcast at a time. Amigos podcast consists of content, rich episodes, funny hosts, and even great singing. Oh, yeah. It's a touchdown every week.
Clearly, he wrote that after our electronic football episode.
Right. And he says, I'm a proud Patreon supporter, and you should be too. Long live the Amigos. So thank you, Tito Boy 666. We appreciate that.
That was nice of Tito Boy.
Yeah.
And he put the 666 in there just to make it a little sweeter.
That's right. And speaking of Patreon supporters, it's time.
Oh, man. This is Tito Boy's favorite part of the show right here. Touchdown.
Our weekly serenade of our lovely Patreon supporters. Level Lord, John Marshall, Matthew Perrone, Ricky DeRocha, Creepy Dead Boy, Biggie CT, the Slow Norris, Stefan Segar Mortensen, Edmund Howard, Glenn, 75, Christopher Hassel, Rabbi Abbott, Chris Foltz, Dreamcatcher Launcher with Ram, Rin, Doubting Lane, Vincent, Adam Battersby, O'Brien's Retro Vintage Gay, How Crazy, Brian Jones, Paul, Harrington, Duncan Styles, Anthony Jarvis, Kate from the Crypt, Josh Nan, Will Williams, Adam Braddock, B. Jonas Rollo, THT, Eric Nelson, Kim, Tommy Humstad, Daniel Bingston, Brutal Barracuda, Darren Coles, Jason Warnes, Pixels of Dawn, and Gilbjorn Barman.
I had no idea what you were playing for most
I figured
of that.
you wouldn't know where I was going with that.
Was that End of the World as we know it?
That's right. That's right. That
apropos.
might have triggered the end of the world.
That's the end of the podcast as we know it. I don't feel so good. Good Lord, man.
All right. Well, Aaron, next week, it's another mystery game. We're going to leave our viewers in suspense.
Everyone out there knows that when we say that, we just don't know.
That's very true. That's very true. It's very clear that we don't know what we're going to do next week. But we'll talk about it, and we'll think about it for upwards of 5 minutes before we make our decision.
Deep thought. No, we always put deep thought into, and then we play Top Banana. That's what happens when we. This is why we said mystery game, because when we just say one without guessing,
right.
It's Top Banana.
It's Top Banana. We're all over again. I'd like to thank everybody hanging out in the chat with us before we go. We got Jason Warnes, Treyguard, Eric, Pishbot.
Pip Plop?
Ricky DeRocher. Thank you guys so much, Duncan, for hanging out in the chat with us. We record live every Friday, except when we don't, around 5:30 or 6.
Sometimes we really record live, you know what I'm saying?
And so if you want to hang out with us on YouTube, just make sure if you're subscribed to our channel, just click that get notifications button and you'll get an email every time we go live.
Indeed.
All right, Aaron, it's time to send them out in style. Until next time, everybody.
Adios. Send them out in